The Valari had long perfected silence. Their world spun beneath violet skies, their cities carved from crystal and grown like roots from the ground. Order was sacred. Emotion was discouraged. And above all, the Elder's law was final. No contact with humans. The reason was never explained, only enforced. The humans were chaos embodied, the Elders said. Their words could ignite wars, their presence could unravel harmony. Every trace of them was buried, classified, and guarded by the Oath Keepers. Most Valari lived and died never knowing what a human truly was. Kareth was not most Valari. She trained in the warrior halls like her siblings, sharp in movement, obedient in tone. But inside, there was always a pressure, like a breath held too long. Curiosity gnawed at her. Not about battle formations or old myths, but the forbidden. The things no one spoke of. The things everyone feared without ever seeing. Then came the anomaly. It began as a meteor streak across the night. Sensors flared. The object broke orbit and crashed into the wastelands, just beyond the designated safe zones. The Elders issued a blackout order. All warriors were to avoid the site. It was classified under Code Black. Kareth went anyway. Her skimmer cut across dunes under cover of cloud. She told herself it was a scouting exercise. She told herself she'd simply observe and report. But when she reached the crash site, all excuses died. The wreckage wasn't Valari tech. Angular, scorched, alien. Smoke hissed from ruptured vents. Something had crawled free, leaving blood and drag marks through the dust. She followed them. Half a ridge away, slumped between jagged rocks, she found it. Him. Pale skin, bloodied, breathing shallow. Wounds seared along the side. And unmistakably, human. He stirred at her approach, blinking through swollen eyes. No weapon. No threat. Just one word, cracked and raw, help. She froze. Protocol was clear. Report. Retreat. Let the purifiers handle it. That was the rule. The only rule. But the man didn't plead again. He just looked at her like someone who already knew the answer. She didn't know why she knelt beside him. She didn't know why she stabilized the wound, injected pain suppressants, or carried him to the skimmer. She only knew that, for the first time, a rule felt like a lie. He faded in and out during the ride. She asked no questions. She told herself this wasn't defiance, it was containment. She could still report later. She just needed time to think. Back in the outer cliffs, far from surveillance towers, Kareth sealed him inside an old refuge cave. She cleaned the blood. She activated healing salves. She watched him sleep, studied the roughness of his skin, the strange geometry of his gear. His name, when he awoke, was Ellis Rowe. Captain. He'd been shot down while evading a blockade. He didn't ask where he was. Didn't panic. Just listened. He never called her an alien. That first night, she stood at the cave's mouth, staring into the stars, her body rigid with shame. She had broken the law. She had helped the enemy. And yet, something inside her felt terrifyingly right. She didn't sleep. The next day, he asked questions. Not tactical ones. Personal ones. Why her people didn't sing. Why the caves had no names. Why her voice never rose above a whisper. She didn't answer. But she stayed. On the third day, he hummed something. A rhythm, slow and low, pulsing with a kind of defiance that didn't need words. She felt it in her chest before her mind understood. A song. Primitive. Beautiful. No Valari would ever create something so undisciplined. That night, she dreamed for the first time in years. The Elders said humans brought ruin. That their minds corrupted unity. That their thoughts were too loud to coexist with order. Kareth began to wonder if that was the very reason they were feared. She began to feed him stories, Valari epics, legends carved into crystal, tales of order forged from entropy. He listened, but his eyes always drifted elsewhere, as if waiting for the part where someone broke the rules. He asked her if she ever wanted more. More than peace. More than order. More than obedience. She didn't answer. But the silence was its own admission. When she returned to her barracks briefly to recharge supplies, her mentor, Commander Solrin, studied her too closely. "You've been restless," he said. "You smell of the forbidden zone." She lied. But she knew it wouldn't be long before they followed. Back in the cave, Ellis told her stories too. Of cities that stretched to the sky. Of revolutions waged not with weapons, but with ideas. Of mistakes, redemption, pain, and beauty. He spoke of failure not as shame, but as proof of trying. She found herself leaning in. What frightened her most was not his strength, or his resilience, but how little he seemed to care about authority, how easily he rejected control without rage, without fear, simply because it didn't make sense. And how that rejection, that quiet refusal, made her want to do the same. Kareth knew then what the elders had always feared. It wasn't war. It wasn't destruction. It was influence. It was what humans carried without trying, the ability to inspire rebellion just by being who they were. And she had already gone too far. She had crossed the line they drew. And she wasn't going back. Kareth spent days tending to Ellis in the hidden cave, carefully nursing his wounds with salves and sterile cloths scavenged from her own supplies. The more time she spent with him, the more she saw how different humans were, how messy, unpredictable, yet strangely resilient. He never tried to hide his pain or fear, but he refused to surrender to either. When asked how they survived so often, he shrugged and said, "We fall. We get up. We fall again. No one's perfect, but no one stops trying." There was a stubbornness in that simple truth, a defiance that unsettled her. Ellis spoke of Earth, of its endless conflicts, victories, losses, and art born out of chaos. He described music that could break your heart and stories that could change minds. He told her about rebellions sparked by a single voice refusing to be silenced. His words painted a picture of humanity not as warriors or conquerors, but as survivors fueled by hope and will. Kareth found herself drawn not to his strength, but his vulnerability, how openly he admitted fear and failure yet kept pushing forward. It was the opposite of her world, where emotions were locked away and obedience was worshipped. One evening, as the twin moons cast pale light through the cave mouth, Ellis asked her why Valari never questioned the elders' laws. Why they accepted control so completely. She had no answer. The silence was heavy. He told her that freedom wasn't just a word, it was a state of being. It was the right to fail, to choose, and to dream without chains. That kind of freedom was infectious. It spread like wildfire, igniting even the darkest corners. Kareth saw the truth in his words but also the danger. The elders had been right to fear humans, not because of their power, but because of their ability to inspire change. And now, that fire was burning inside her. While Kareth wrestled with her growing doubts, the Valari elders had not forgotten the crash. They sent trackers, relentless and precise, to comb the wastelands. These trackers were trained to detect even the faintest trace of human presence. Kareth knew it was only a matter of time before they found Ellis. She debated fleeing with him, but that meant abandoning her people and everything she'd ever known. Ellis told her that the true fight wasn't on the battlefield, but in hearts and minds. "You can't break what you don't own," he said. "They control your body and laws, but not your spirit." Her resolve hardened. Days passed. Kareth ventured out only at night, scavenging for food and supplies while keeping the cave's location a secret. She began sharing with Ellis fragments of Valari culture, poems in the old tongue, legends of ancient peacekeepers, songs meant to calm storms. In return, Ellis shared tales of Earth's endless imperfections. He told her about artists who painted with blood and hope, poets who spoke truth to power, and common people who stood against tyranny armed only with courage. Kareth began to see herself in those stories, not as a soldier following orders blindly, but as a soul seeking meaning beyond laws and silence. One evening, Kareth caught her own reflection in a pool of water. The warrior's mask she wore for years was cracking. The elder's control was slipping through her fingers like sand. She feared what that meant for her future, but she also felt alive in a way she never had before. Then came the inevitable. The trackers discovered the cave's proximity. A faint trail of human technology was enough to alert them. Kareth felt their presence before they arrived, the cold certainty of impending judgment. Ellis urged her to run, to save herself. He knew the punishment for harboring a human was exile or worse, soul severance, a ritual that erased memories and emotions, leaving only a hollow shell. But Kareth refused. She would not abandon him. Not now. She prepared for confrontation, knowing this moment would change everything. As the trackers closed in, Kareth felt no fear, only a fierce clarity. The rebellion had already begun, sparked by the presence of one wounded human and a young warrior willing to defy ancient laws. In that quiet defiance lay humanity's greatest weapon, not brute force, but the courage to challenge the status quo. The trackers found them faster than Kareth expected. Their arrival was silent but absolute, cutting through the cave's hidden calm like a blade. Ellis urged her once more to flee, but Kareth stood firm. This was no longer just about survival. It was about truth. They were captured without resistance. Shackled and brought before the elders, the chamber was cold and void of mercy. The ancient figures sat high on their thrones, faces impassive, voices low but heavy with judgment. "You have broken the great prohibition," the eldest intoned. "Your betrayal threatens the balance we have preserved for millennia." Kareth met their gaze without flinching. Ellis remained silent, but his eyes held a fire that even the elders could not extinguish. The elders spoke not of humans as warriors or destroyers, but of something deeper. "We do not fear your strength, Captain Ellis Rowe. Nor your weapons, nor your numbers. We fear what you awaken." They revealed a history long buried. Centuries ago, minor contact with humans ignited uprisings across Valari colonies. Not through violence, but through hope. The human presence sowed seeds of defiance and choice, concepts alien and dangerous to the elders' ordered rule. Kareth understood then the true nature of their fear. It wasn't the damage humans could cause with weapons, but the unrest they sparked in minds long conditioned to obey. Her sentence was swift and merciless, soul severance. A ritual designed to erase memory, emotion, and will, leaving behind only a hollow echo of a Valari life. As the ritual began, Kareth felt her identity slipping away, the sharp edges of who she was dissolving into numbness. Panic surged in Ellis, raw and unyielding. Using stolen tech, he broke free from his restraints and surged toward her side. With seconds to spare, Ellis disrupted the ritual, pulling Kareth from the edge of oblivion. They escaped the chamber amid alarms and chaos. But the elders' response was immediate. Their broadcast systems, triggered by the disruption, sent images of Kareth's defiance across the Valari networks. What was meant as punishment became a spark. The act of rescue, of rebellion, could no longer be hidden. Ellis and Kareth fled into the night, pursued by the full force of the elders' enforcers. Yet, despite their desperate flight, something had changed. Kareth's mind burned not with fear, but with clarity. The fearlessness of humans, the refusal to be conquered not by force but by spirit, was contagious. She realized the war wasn't won on battlefields or through firepower. It was won in the minds awakened, the chains broken, the silent rebellion that spreads like wildfire in the hearts of those who dare to dream. Ellis looked at her and said simply, "They feared what you could become. Not because you're strong, but because you won't be silent." Kareth nodded, knowing the path ahead was dangerous and uncertain, but hers to walk. Together, they vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a society shaken by the smallest act of human defiance. Kareth and Ellis became fugitives overnight. Every settlement, every outpost buzzed with news of their escape. The elders branded them traitors, threats to the fragile order. But what the elders feared most was not the escape itself, it was the story they carried. Whispers began among the youth, the discontent, those who had only known silence and obedience. Kareth's defiance became a symbol. Tales of the human and the Valari who dared to challenge the elders spread quietly, like a spark in dry grass. Where once there was resignation, now flickered hope. Kareth traveled through hidden paths, meeting secret groups who longed for change but had no voice. With Ellis's knowledge of human resilience and her growing understanding of her people's pain, they became more than fugitives, they became leaders of a quiet rebellion. They shared stories of freedom, choice, and resistance. Poetry replaced silence. Songs replaced fear. The chains the elders had forged began to crack. The elders tried to clamp down harder, sending enforcers and spreading propaganda about chaos and ruin. But the more they tightened their grip, the stronger the rebellion grew. Valari youth began to question the laws they had never dared to break. Secret gatherings turned into protests. Silent defiance became open challenge. One day, Ellis found a human rescue ship orbiting nearby. It was a chance to escape, to return to safety and distance. But Kareth hesitated. She looked at Ellis and said, "You showed me what freedom means. Now I fight for it myself." Ellis understood. He offered no arguments, only a nod. Kareth chose to stay, to lead the fight against the elders' tyranny. Her decision galvanized the movement. With her knowledge of Valari culture and Ellis's human spirit, they united their people in rebellion, not with weapons, but with ideas. The elders' old world trembled as young Valari raised voices they had been told to silence for generations. Kareth became a beacon, not because she was strong, but because she dared to be free. The final message lingered in the air. Humans don't win wars by force alone. They win by changing the battlefield itself, by awakening defiance, inspiring hope, and refusing to be conquered. And that was a power the elders had never understood.